Hey, welcome back to Candid. I have repeat guest with me here today, Brian McRae. Welcome back, Brian.
Thank you, Dr. Schroeder. I'm really happy to be here today. It was such an exciting and energetic conversation last time. Thank you for inviting me back to share some more.
It's taken a while for us to get here. We've had a couple of cancellations because you got sick, then I got sick. So I'm glad we finally are healthy and are able to talk again.
Same.
You're feeling better?
You know, this thing, I'm going on 3 weeks. This thing is still chasing me, and I never get sick. It's very rare that I especially carry something like this, but it's still lingering after 3 weeks and two trips. My wife has it now. She's
No.
so yeah, this bug has been pretty intense.
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of people. So I am glad you're feeling better. I'm glad you're back on the air. And I want to pick up our conversation from last time. So you were the guest that introduced this concept of a new masculinity. And you got very deep into the biases from your past and sort of the moments that you recognized that you needed to be a different person at home and in the workplace. Again, this new masculinity. But we didn't talk about the origin of your story. So can we step back a little bit and talk about when you got started or what the tipping point was? When did you know that things needed to change?
That's a great question. I think there are two answers. The first one is, when did I know that something needed to change and hadn't done any work yet? And that was whenever my first marriage fell apart. It was me. I walked out. It was in my early 30s. I had done no work on a very traumatic childhood, and that was the starting point, kind of the entry into the journey of, hey, something's clearly wrong here because it cost me my first marriage. What do I need to do to fix it? That started a journey, 20-year off and on journey of all sorts of therapy, CBT, DBT, psychiatric care, just reading books, anything I could get my hands on to try to at least understand this kind of map of the way that my weird mind worked, and had always committed to becoming a better version of a man, a better father, a better friend, a better husband, a better employee, but never could follow through with that. This, sketchy employment history, failed marriage, a lot of transactional friendships, not really understanding what that was about. And that fundamentally began to change, 20 years ago. But rounding out that last mile, really becoming even this idea of the new masculinity or a new man, I have to give all the credit in the world to my friend, Dr. Maggie Izutsu. She's an ordained Presbyterian minister, and also is a psychologist, and is one of my closest friends. And in the realm of what you and I are talking about, Dr. Short, our friendship developed immediately. She was actually a client of mine, and I just knew from our first conversation that we were going to be really good friends. And we got really deep really fast. I opened up to her a lot, and she opened my eyes to these fundamental ideas. And there are a lot of books that have been written. The Chalice and the Blade by Riane Eisler comes to mind, that discuss this patriarchy that exists. And so she introduced a lot of these concepts and introduced a lot of the advanced psychology to help me become a better husband and a better father and a better friend. And that last mile, that transformation part where you're actually doing the work to evolve, that's the hardest bit. And it's the bit I had been struggling with the most. And so she really helped me through that. And that was the genesis. She actually coined the term new man. She kind of described this idea of the new man in the modern age. And that's something I'd always aspired to. So I kind of extended this into this theme of new masculinity and taking it into the workplace, and taking it into the home and into the marriage and into parenting my kids. And so that journey started, about 2 years ago was when our friendship really took off. But it's been intense. And I think what it required of me that's relevant to this conversation is it required of me to be completely transparent and honest to
Yep.
myself,
Yep.
but also to be vulnerable with someone whom I had just met. Like, this was a new friendship, but someone I just inherently believed that I could trust, and I really opened up to her. It was what was required of me if I was going to really have someone understand what I was dealing with.
Right.
So that's always a risk, social setting or a professional setting. But in this instance, the payoff was enormous because she's become a lifelong friend. We're colleagues. We're collaborating on a project together to bring some of this knowledge into the world. And she's become one of my closest confidants.
That's amazing. I love that the term a new man came from an amazing woman.
Right.
I,
Me
I
too.
mean, often it takes someone looking from the outside in to help us see ourselves and to help us down the road of evolution. But I love that for you, since it was your trek to this new masculinity the source was a woman. I mean, I think that's
I
really telling.
It is. It really is, and it was her perspective, that I there are things that how do I put this? She explained things very clearly in simple terms that I'd always known. This idea of a universe out of balance, this male domination, this hierarchy being weird. I talked about Power versus Force, a book I'd read on our last broadcast fits into that same modality. But she was able to put these philosophies into clear and simple terms and also be able to observe me as a man and point out the places that were opportunities for change. So it was a masterclass, if I think for both of us, for me to be able to go out and then implement these really hard things to do. But again, the payoff has been enormous across the board.
Do you mind if I go back? You mentioned a rocky childhood in your intro. Can we get that personal? Can we talk about that? Because I think that resonates with a lot of people. A number of people I've talked to, it goes back to trauma in the childhood. So, how did that set you up for needing to go on this truck of being a new man and new masculinity?
That's the key question, and if we're going to get vulnerable, that's I'll
Yeah,
give you
let's do it.
the real answer. Yeah, let's do
Yeah,
it. So, my childhood was very traumatic. I moved just about every year, went to a different school just about every year. My
killer for
father
a kid. That's
is
killer
it
for a kid.
is.
Yeah,
My father was an alcoholic, like a daily drinker alcoholic from the time he was 18. He was not, he was worthless as a parent. He was, um, they had 4 children by the time my mom was 22, and he laid in bed all day and went out and drank at night. And she wound up kicking him out, and he was peripherally involved, but really alcohol. He literally crawled inside of a bottle and he drank himself to death, quite literally, when he was about my age. My mother remarried very quickly, and she remarried a Vietnam veteran who was really messed up. I mean, he was a chopper pilot, really bad PTSD, and he didn't abuse me, but he abused my mom and the younger ones badly. Things that I witnessed. That relationship was rocky and tumultuous and ended pretty fast. And then she married a cop, an undercover narcotics cop, who they were married for a good long while, and he physically abused me, beat me on a regular basis, like with open fists and boards and things like that. And I'm shaking just talking about it now. It was such a I can't, especially now being a parent myself. That
yeah,
was one of the most striking things about it was when my children were born. The thought of laying my hands on my child is just so repulsive, and to
right.
consider.
Yeah,
And so I think when you're brought up in that environment, one of two things happens: either you inherit it and pass it on to the next generation, which is what happened to me. I'm sure my dad's parents I know were the same way. So you pass it on to the next generation, and the cancer continues, or you change. And what I tell everyone about that experience is those examples of fathers were excellent examples of fathers. They were excellent example. They were almost caricatures of the toxic versions of fathers that we hear about. And so to experience them, especially as an empath, as a feeler, like as an HSP, to experience that on a daily basis, the one thing that I kept coming back to over and over, and this is from a very young age, is I will never do this to my children. I never want my children to fear me.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's something I
You
that
broke the pattern. You
I
broke the
broke the
chain.
pattern. That's
Yeah,
precisely
it
correct.
ended with
And
you. I love it.
that's right. And it ended with me on purpose. And that intent, when I wrecked my first marriage, that's when the realization that, oh, something is really wrong here. Like I just did something I just really, really wrong here. And that's what started the journey of, okay, I'm clearly broken. I got to fix this before I mess up a lot of other people's relationships too.
Yeah,
So that was where it
yeah.
started.
Yeah, your childhood reminds me so much of my mom. So when I was writing my book on my mental health journey, I talked a lot to my mom. My dad had since passed, and my mother's upbringing was just tumultuous. So she was one of 6 kids. My grandfather was a violent, raging alcoholic
Mm,
and a con man. So not only did she witness my grandma getting beaten and her siblings, but also they got run out of town all the time
yeah.
under hail of gunfire a lot of times because he was always screwing somebody over.
Jesus.
Um, and so 3 of the siblings sort of kept on that path. Like they had problems with alcohol, and then the other half decided that's not the life that they wanted, and my mom was one of those. She married my dad, who's in the background, who's just a phenomenally kind person. You remind me a lot of him in that he was very an empathy infused one of the first empathy infused males in my life. Loved his kids, loved his wife, and really helped finish off the family unit. But it was my mom breaking that chain. If she hadn't have broken that pattern, would she have married my dad or would she have married somebody like my grandfather? So it's just so exciting to hear from somebody else who was able to break that. I am the recipient of her breaking that. I didn't have to break any pattern. You actually broke that pattern. So like that's amazing to me.
That's really remarkable. That makes me emotional because my boys are men. Two of my boys are men now. They're in their 20s, and I see the men that they've become.
Yeah.
And to see that result play out is something that I'll never forget. It'll say be with me forever to know that toxicity is no longer in the universe, and it's been replaced with these men who are capable of love and depth, and who see women in an entirely different light, and who are contributors to the universe. That's
Yeah.
the greatest gift, and that's why
Yeah.
I look back, especially now as an old man, I look back on that with gratitude because that childhood is what allowed me to become this version of myself and to put this energy forward in the universe instead of the other. And I think, Kristy, one of the things that's really important for us to understand is that, and I keep coming back to myself, is that my story is tragic, but it's also not special. There's all sort between your parent, everyone. There's so many people that live every day with really bad abuse, all kinds of abuse. And you think about how destructive that is because it's generational. It causes generational trauma, and it's a problem. It's not. It's so I'm not special. I'm one of millions and millions of people who silently carry this every single day. And I think that's one of the ways that we can reconnect or connect
Yeah.
in the workplace or socially is to be honest about our trauma, not in a trauma bonding
Right.
negative sort of way, but in an
Right.
honest sort of way because that trauma is what made us who we are. And it is a way to you and I know a lot more about each other because I just shared this with you and you just shared with me, and so it's a way for us to get to know our whole selves. So it's also a really difficult place to start. Just you can see how difficult it was for me to even have the conversation, but so crucial because again, it's so many women. You think about so many women who live with abuse, all forms of abuse, and that's something that men, especially large men like me, never have to contend with. And so I keep that in the mirror of perspective anytime I get upset by those memories, is to just remember is that hey, this is not doesn't make you special because there are a lot of people that live with this, and that's where the focus should lie.
Well, I like that you brought up my background or my childhood was tragic, but it's not it doesn't make me special. I mean, it's not a true tragedy because it's so common. I think it would have been a true tragedy if you continued the pattern. That's
Right.
where the real tragedy would have been. But your background and you being honest about your background, that's actually the ticket to providing perspective to others. So again, yes, the more honest we can be in the workplace, and again, not trauma bonding, but just basically bonding on good old fashioned honesty and then offering that perspective. Most of the time, that gives other people permission to talk about what they've been through or what they've overcome. That not only creates human connection, but as a leader, that creates trust as well with your team.
I think about that. That's such a great observation. And I think about that early in my career before I had really dug into this work, even into my mid career. And the image that I projected was this image of strength. I mean, here's this, big, tall, strapping, athletic dude. Well, I leaned into that energy and used it. And so I was, the loudest voice in the room, just the typical and leaned into all of those masculinity tools, if you will, and I used them instead of being honest about who I really was, this empathic HSP who was, hiding under the covers. And that ego mismatch was probably one of the biggest reasons for the career instability, was that I wasn't able to show up with my true self. And instead of doing that, I leaned into all these tools that are so readily available to us.
Yeah. 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 I also want to go back and just make a quick comment on your kids and you breaking the pattern. I think you said, I mean, that was your greatest gift. Of course, our parents give us life, and that's a gift, but I have told my mom after hearing her story, "Thank you for giving me life, but thank you for breaking the pattern." And you gave that gift to your sons, and I'm sure that they've taken that forward, and that's why they become the men that they become.
They
I mean, I
have.
think that's just an amazing story of evolution for you.
And I'm been very honest with my children about my upbringing and very honest about especially the intentional parts of the way that I parent. Like, hey, I don't ever want you to be scared of me. I don't ever want you to feel like you have to hide anything from me. It's the opposite. I want you to be able to share everything with me because I'm your biggest advocate. And I did that from the start. I remember when my son Bennett was born. It was right at the as my marriage was falling apart, and I'd done something horrible to my wife, and she was even considering not allowing me to be at the birth. Like it was that to that level. And I remember after he was born, he's in the warming crib, and I'm so confused. And I had been counting on becoming a father as the thing that was going to solve this. I'm going to become a father myself, and it's all I wanted. I just wanted a family of my own, and I
Magic
was
bullet.
so, yeah, I was so looking forward to being overwhelmed with joy and overwhelmed with love. And my child is in this warming crib, and I don't feel anything. Like I felt nothing, and it was terrifying because I thought, oh, I'm going to be a terrible father. Like I just thought it was over. I just because come to find out that's very common, and that's one of those times when, man, I really wish I had a father to kind of sidle up to me and put his hand on my shoulder and go, "Hey, man, I don't know what you're feeling, but whatever it is, it's okay." But not having that, I thought, "Oh, this means I'm going to fail to be a terrible father." And I remember looking down at my son, going, "Hey, kiddo, I don't really know what's going on here, but I promise you two things: I will always love you, and I will always tell you the truth." And that's pretty much sums it up. I mean, that's what I've always done with my children from day one is I always love them and I always tell them the truth. And I use it presents when you operate from that mindset with your kids, especially this radical transparency, it it turns mistakes into opportunities because I lose my temper with my kids. It happens. I make mistakes,
Sure, we
but
all do.
I'm the first person to own it. And I turn that into an opportunity to demonstrate, hey, here's how you take responsibility when you make mistakes out in the world. Because guess what? You're human. Like your dad's not a superhero. He's just a guy and he makes mistakes too. So here is how you own it. And that is such a powerful lesson to give a child, and it works. My youngest is 13, and his coach pulled me aside recently about there had been an incident among some members of the team, and he said, the other kids that were involved in the incidents made excuses and they tried to sidle out of it, but your son didn't. He explained what went wrong. He explained what he was going to do to mitigate it, and he took full responsibility for it. Now inside I'm beaming. He did that exactly, but he did exactly what I told him to do.
Yeah.
And after the coach and I stopped talking, we were in the car, and I said, Davis, I'm like, what happened there? And I was like, he said, I just did what you told me to do, Dad. And I was one of those moments where you like really keep it together, Dad. Don't start crying because,
Right,
but
right. Yeah.
that's the result of, hey, I'm gonna act from a place of love with you every day, and I'm gonna tell you the truth. I'm not gonna be a pretend superhero. I'm not gonna hide the vagaries of the world. I'm gonna show you the real deal because somebody's got to show you the way. And it's so powerful when you think about it, doing that over the course of a lifetime. Think about the energy that creates and the knowledge. Gosh, if I had that same knowledge as a kid, wow, right?
I mean, authenticity is just an enormous gift, and it's honestly in my life, it's never failed me. So in my 20s, when I went through my big spiral, my big depression, when I was having suicidal ideations, that's when my therapist told me, he said, "Okay, here's your homework assignment. It's time to talk to your parents." Because I'd kept this from them. I was a middle child. I was perfect, or I tried to be perfect. And that would have just blown up my whole rep, right? But the moment I went and started talking to my parents and they started sharing their past with me in a very authentic, uber honest way, it informed me about who I was, and that was part of the medicine that helped me get better. But
Powerful stuff.
their honesty also helped me move forward with what I wanted to do and the person that I wanted to be. And that sort of insight, like what you're doing with your sons, is such a gift. I mean, even better, Brian, like your kids sound too young to have their own kids, right? They're not.
They're in their early mid 20s, so still a little young, but close.
But when they do, and they're there next to that warming basket, you can put your hand on their shoulder and
That's
say,
right.
"Well, it's gonna be okay. You're gonna do great."
I have had that conversation 1,000 times in my head. That's one, and that's interesting, because I practically grew up without a father, like for the most part, like
Yeah,
just pretty much
you did
that
grow
that
up without a
role
father.
was. And
Completely.
so there are these moments in my life, even now, when I'm like, wow, I really could use dad right now because I have no idea, or I just ran into this thing that I had no idea was even a thing, but so I have a list of those things. I'm like, okay, now I know, when my kid is getting married, I know kind of what he's going to go through. I know how to be present for him, to be that person that I needed. But it's those moments that pop up. My very close friend lost her child recently, and she was devastated. That's just every parent's worst nightmare. And so I was, made it a point to be present with her. But I remember that being one of the moments, because I didn't even know how to process that. Didn't even that. I mean, that would have been a time for me to call my dad to go, "Hey, Dad, how do I do this?" And just there's all kinds of moments like that, having the type of relationship that you have with your parents. I want to go back to. I actually have a question for you about that
Yeah, lay it
conversation that
on
you
me.
had with them.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how their transparency helped speed the process of healing for you. Like, 'cause I'm sure there was something in you that you knew they were telling you the truth, right? And so how did that? I mean, I would think about the time. Like, I'm sure that helped the velocity of you getting through that process, because you at least you had the kernel of truth you could hang on to. So what was
Yeah.
that like?
Well, I'll be honest, I can remember the exact moment when we had this conversation. I'd gone over to my parents and we were in the stairwell and we just started talking organically about it to the point where we didn't want to move. So my parents said, let's all sit down. And in that moment, I had been in therapy about, I think, 8 months by the time I went to talk to my parents. And I can tell you in that moment, in that stairwell, it was an immediate burden release. So their information of their childhoods and how they grew up, and me seeing the pattern of how I inherited these patterns moving forward gave me a sense of I don't have to figure this all out on my own. So it informed me about who I was. But on top of that, it gave me back my parents. So my parents couldn't fully be my parents because I was keeping everything from them. I thought I would burden them if I let them know what I was going through. So I felt even better, obviously, and my recovery came much faster because now I had fully my parents to lean on because I was being fully honest with them. Not because they didn't want to be my parents, but because I wasn't allowing them to be my parents. So you being so authentic with your kids and setting that up early. I mean, I waited until my 20s to be okay with being authentic and being okay with not covering anything up. You've already set that up with your kids. So imagine what you have sheltered them from in terms of figuring out where they came from. But I mean, that's my story. And that's why your story resonates with me. It's just, I think it's so impactful.
I think that's really beautiful, Christy. I really do. And I think it's because you experienced it like a light switch. And all of a sudden, your family dynamic was whole again, and you had the support structure in place, and the love and acceptance of your parents, and you were held, and you were heard, and you were accepted, and you were understood. And what a sense of safety that must have created for a 20-year-old just out in the world dealing with all these complicated emotions. And I think interesting inflection point. 8 months of therapy is enough time to start to get a handle on, okay, this is kind of what's going on in my brain. I don't really understand the deep cause behind it, but at least I'm in a place where I sort of understand. And so to be able to lock in that knowledge with your parents and kind of turn that family tumbler at that time was crucial. I mean, it's a really beautiful thing. And to really think about your parents sitting down and recognizing that moment, going, oh, we got to have a real talk here. Like,
Yes.
we've got to get, and this was, we're in your 20s. I mean, this is probably in what that means you're in the 90s, maybe.
Yeah.
And so that was this,
Yeah. 90.
mental health was not really a thing back then, right? It wasn't something that was readily available for your parents to talk about. So the fact that they sat down with you and created that environment, and kind of helped you make that gift, that's truly beautiful.
Well, and another thing too, you just mentioned like therapy, like you didn't really talk about therapy in the 90s. I think it was starting to gain more momentum. But talking to my parents and that immediate acceptance helped me to talk about it more authentically to everybody else. So that also gave me permission to talk about my journey and what I was going through with people outside of my family, people at work. I mean, I'm having panic attacks in the morning, like, my boss needed to know that. So it did open up a whole other world for me, and the fact that it started with my parents, because I remember in that stairwell, it could have turned out very differently. I remember I started to talk about it, and then I got scared, and I think I probably took a step toward the entrance, and I remember my mom. I don't remember if she touched my arm, but it felt like maybe she did. She goes, "Well, why don't we just sit down?" And then everything changed.
Deft.
Yeah,
It's good parenting
yeah.
right there.
Great, great parents. I'm so, so lucky. Woo! Boy, it's emotional. I do wanna go back to that inflection point for you, and I'm sorry, it's doctor, your friend that wrote the
Dr.
book,
Maggie Izutsu.
Dr. Maggie Uzutsu. Can you just give us a little insight on that phone call? Because you said this only happened a couple of years ago. You're on that phone. What was happening in your head that you wanted to start talking to her and then start down this road of this new masculinity?
That the best way I can answer that question was just to talk about our first, like, we met in a client. She was a client of mine. She was a referral, and she came into my office, and we had a business conversation. But it was also a very real conversation, and she's very intelligent, which I like. It was a very lively conversation, a unique conversation. So I thought she had, and even told her, I'm like, we're going to be friends. Like, I just knew that we were going to be friends after that first meeting, and we followed through. Like, we just developed a friendship. And I think that in and of itself is remarkable, especially for men, because developing new friendships at our age is not simple. It's not easy.
Especially with women.
It's simple though. I mean, it is, because it was very simple. You just find the right people, but the value of this relationship cannot be overstated. But it was created because two people were interested in one another, and in a truly, like, platonic friendship sort of way. And we were interested, and we got to know each other, and learned. And I just decided she was safe, and decided to tell her everything. And that's an interesting, it's been this common thread through this entire conversation is when we decide to be transparent, good things usually follow, because the truth is the truth is the truth. And so I chose to just tell this woman the full truth. And she is such a wealth of knowledge, spiritual knowledge, philosophical knowledge, and psychological knowledge. And I read probably 5 or 6 books in a row that she recommended that were just groundbreaking for me, because they really rounded these concepts into crystal clear thinking. And so the relationship, it evolved very naturally, but it was an intentional for I chose to invest in this relationship, and she chose to invest in this relationship. We both saw something,
Mhm.
and I started to reveal things to her, and she is very good at switching and putting on the clinical hat. And so we could do that midstream and be able to deconstruct something. And she always had something simple but entirely unique perspective wise. And it was usually right. And so the relationship, it wasn't really a moment as much as it was a series of organic moments that were highly vulnerable and highly connected and very human. And it's evolved into this relationship that is brother, sister, mother, son. I don't know quite how to describe. We love each other very deeply, and we're working together on this project that we're both deeply committed to. We go to the same church. We've integrated our lives via this friendship, but it's something that we chose to do it. And maybe that's the right answer to this question is you choose it. And you choose it, and you have to be honest with yourself if you're going to say you choose it. And really, because I mean, I gave her the dirt, the ugly
Right.
bits too, right? And that's
Yeah.
not easy to do. But you think about back to your conversation with your parents, and your mom pulling you back into that room, and you at some point made a choice to just tell them everything.
Yes.
And,
As
and
hurtful as it was, because it
right, as
doesn't
painful
feel
as it
good.
was,
It's
it
like
doesn't,
vomiting. It doesn't feel good coming out, but it feels good
especially when you
after it's out.
especially when you don't know how it's going to be accepted, right?
Right. Yes.
But that was the inflection point. And so for Maggie and I, our relationship kind of organically started that way, but we just chose to dive in and tell each other everything. Like that's very simple. So think about this in the workplace context, and think about, you said something about your boss needed to know that you have panic attacks. You're right about that from truly just from a functional HR perspective, yes, but also
Mhm.
just human.
Yeah.
And it's really important for us to be able to have an environment where we can display human characteristics to our bosses and have our bosses treat us like humans in return. Oh, your panic attacks. Well, that means I'm concerned for you personally as your friend or as a fellow human being. I care about your panic attacks. The manager stuff is secondary. How can we help support those, right? So it becomes more about maintaining the relationship rather than the managerial umbrella over the top of it.
Yeah. Well, and just really the more people you can let in, the better. I mean, why not show your true authentic self? For years, I lived behind a facade because I didn't want people to see the whole truth. And I had partners tell me, you give 90% of yourself, but you hold about 10% for yourself. And that's the bad stuff. That's the stuff that was wrapped in fear, stuff I didn't want people to see. So one of the big gifts for me is yes, it completely redefined my relationship with my parents back in my 20s because it allowed them, I gave them permission to come and help me. Whereas I'd put up a wall before and said, I can take care of myself. I'm not going to be a burden. It's same is true with everybody else in your life. And I'm starting to discover that now. I'm really being intentional about when someone offers me help, that I say thank you and I accept it instead of my immediate answer being no. Because not only does it help me, I also think of over all these years what I've taken away from other people who wanted to help me. I know how good I feel when I can help somebody, but I have taken something away by not allowing someone to help me because I think I'm unburdening them. So just so much goes with being authentic. So much good stuff comes out of being our true authentic selves.
You think about the opportunities that creates. So if we tend to avoid tragedy, divorce, death. My friend whose child passed, she said that about half of her friends just abandoned her, like people that she didn't expect, probably because they didn't know how to handle it. Because
You don't know what to
I
say.
remember going, how do I even what do I even start here? But then there were people that surprised her, people that were peripheral who showed up. So it's really interesting to have that be the thing that connects us, and being able to use that level of intimacy as a means to strengthen a relationship. And it kind of flips us on its head where we want to hide those raw parts of ourselves, but those are the exact things that make us human. And where I find myself is I have a friend of mine who is going through a divorce, and it's under it's as good of circumstances as a divorce can be, but divorce is a tragedy. Like there's no good way to do it. My ex-wife and I maintained a really great positive co-parenting relationship, but I'll still carry that regret to my grave. It's just a tragedy. And so knowing that, I'm like, oh, I'm going to show up for her. And so I text her and I'm like, hey, if you need help, like I moved some furniture for her, and I'm like, you need to understand that this is a very dark time and you're going to feel lonely, but you are not alone. I'm your first call, and I actively just check in. Hey, how are you doing today? Like, what's going on today? And being intentional and using that darkness, that thing that people would typically hide behind, as an opportunity to connect, an
Yes.
opportunity to build a friendship with someone who's important to you. Like that flips this whole thing on its head. And you think about that, what that would do for us as humans if we are looking for opportunities for people to be vulnerable, right? It changes the dynamic completely.
Percent. Oh my god, I think this is a great place to bring this episode to a conclusion. Everything that we've talked about has been emotional and it's been authentic, and I'm hoping that it resonates with people. And I think typically my last question is, do you have any added words of advice or, sage advice? But I think that you said it when you talked about that tipping point for you. It's you just make the choice to be completely authentic and honest. Anything you want to add on to that as we close?
I just add on to that. I think there are two versions of being authentic. There's the I'm going to project the best version of myself, authentic, and there's the I'm going to be radically honest with myself. And because that's the first thing we have to be able to admit to ourselves, and hey, we're not. And then that's the part I'm going to share. I'm going to be radically like, that's true authenticity. And so I think there's a difference. And that's where, when I think about vulnerability, and when I think about presence, and when I think about authenticity, that's what I think about is, let's get into the stuff that you don't want to share. Like, that's what real authentic, and that's where the gold is, right? That's
It
where the
is.
gold, that's where the insight always is in
Mhm.
those hard truths. And
Yes.
so that's what that's probably, in terms of developing and getting better, asking myself that hard question every day of, what's the hard thing that you're avoiding? What's the truth that you don't want to talk about? And then starting there.
Yeah, that's great advice, but actually applying empathy in a more functional, emotional way to be a better leader. So, Brian, we're also decided we're going to have a series of talks because with us, it just happens organically, which is wonderful. And I think we're both on the same page. The next time I want to lead into all of these experiences, how to take functional empathy and really envelop it into leadership and what that means and the outcomes that that can have. So if you're down with that, that's going to be our next conversation.
I can't wait.
Cool. Brian, thank you so much for coming back on Candid. You're going to come back again, which I look forward to. And listeners, please come back again as I continue to get candid.
Can she say that?